So follow along with me today. It's not a great time to be staring at your phones because that's really pretty rude and disrespectful. But what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about biomes here real briefly in succession. Then we're going to roll down to lab, kind of have some fun. We're going to get out all of the jars that we collected down at the creek or down at the pond. And you guys are going to have an opportunity to go through those and see if you can find anything that's alive in there, right? It will be a little bit challenging. Like, you have to search for what's in there. You're going to have to move the slide around on the stage a little bit. You might have to get more than one drop of water. You're going to have to make a wet mount with the cover slip. So some of those things we did the other day when we tried to do the paramecium lab, which fell on its face, right? You're going to do some of that similar stuff. Once you find something, it's going to be moving. So you're going to have to get your thumbs on that slide and chase it. You've got to move the slide while you're looking through it. And if you can call me over there, I'll help you identify it. I'll get a little book and we'll take a look and see what you find in there. I'm as interested as these guys are. I think it'll be really neat to see what was living out there. And then later on, maybe in, I don't know, half a year or so, like we'll wait another semester or so, we'll get those jars back out and we'll see if it changed, if there's different stuff in there, which could be kind of interesting. Some of them are already changing rapidly, especially the one with the dead fish in there. It's going through some population overgrowth of bacteria for sure. So should be fun. But let's talk here. You're welcome to take a few notes because you can use them on the test. We're just going to talk about a couple of things. The first one is biomes. Okay, biomes are large areas of land, so they're big regions. They're not small like our little patch of woods out there. They're vast areas across the surface of the earth that have typically the same type of plant life. Okay, so think of this in terms of, if you go out to what we call the desert, that would be a biome. Okay, what kind of plants live in the desert? Cactus, right? There's all kinds of cacti out there, and that's really what kind of makes it a desert. Well, why is it only cacti that live out there? It's the type of precipitation they get, how much rain happens. It's what type of soil there is. It's what type of animals live there. There's a lot of factors that contribute to why cacti grow right there, and it's always cacti, right? And that makes it a desert. We've got lots of other biomes. Our temperate forest, deciduous forest that we went to out here. If we let this area go, a big swath of the planet is temperate deciduous forest. So that's describing the fact that there's big broadleaf trees that grow there, okay? Why do those trees grow there? Once again, it has to do with climate, rainfall in particular, the types of animals and all those things make it the way that it is, okay? So that's essentially what a biome is. Now, let's roll back to our levels of organization. I think we already talked about this, but you will probably see it on the test. So if we go from the smallest thing that's alive up to the biggest thing that kind of contains living creatures, we start off with the cell. And there are single-celled creatures. You're made up of a whole bunch of individual cells, right? All working together. Your cells make up tissues. For instance, your muscle tissue, right? You have specific muscle cells that make up your muscle tissues, and those make up organs. For instance, your heart is made of muscle tissue, and it's an organ. Those organs, your lungs, your kidneys, your skin, right? All those things, your heart, they make up an organism, which is what you are. Organisms can make up populations if you have a whole bunch of the same type, right? A whole bunch of humans together, that's a human population. A community is a group of all the living things in that area. So you're part of the community. The pigeons are part of our community here. The earthworms are, the grass is. Whatever lives together is part of the same community. When we jump up to ecosystem, now we're including all the non-living stuff, right? All the abiotic stuff. We're including the soil itself, the air, the water, the sunlight, all those abiotic factors that kind of play a role. And that's why when we made those jars, we literally called them ecosystems in a jar. You contained all the living and non-living stuff in a jar and sealed it off. So it's like a little ecosystem. Now, when we jump from ecosystem to biome, the scale gets much bigger. So instead of just living and non-living stuff together, and all the communities and all that, now we're talking about big regions, like an entire desert region of the earth, okay, or an entire grasslands region of the earth, or the ocean. It's pretty big. Then finally, we could jump out to the whole ball of wax, which is the biosphere. essentially all the parts of the planet that contain life, which is virtually every part of our planet, except probably deep down, deep down towards the core and the mantle and all that. So the biosphere is kind of everything. Everybody got that? So terrestrial biomes, the word terrestrial just means land. So terrestrial biomes are land biomes. You'll see that word today when you're doing your assignment. It should hopefully make sense to you. Let me shut that window. Aquatic biomes, the word aquatic just means water. So in your jar, you made an aquatic ecosystem. Okay? An aquatic biome would be like different regions of the ocean, be aquatic biomes. Okay? Lakes would be aquatic biomes. Everybody feel comfortable about biomes? It's really a pretty simple concept, right? So let's talk succession. This is an important one today because it will be on the test. Successions are how an ecosystem changes to get back to what we call the stable climax community. So let's say that there's some destruction somewhere, like a volcano erupts, which I think is actually what happened here, and it knocks down all the trees, just bowls them over, right? What's going to happen to that area? Well, you guys probably can guess. Little grasses are going to start to grow back, eventually little shrubs, finally bigger trees. Different animals will suddenly return that need those trees and those things to survive, and it will once again look how it did before the big impact of the volcano, right? That's succession. It's the change from sort of a disturbed ecosystem all the way back to what we call its climax. So the climax point for an ecosystem is where it's stable for hundreds of years. Like it would be that if we left it alone virtually forever, so till the plates move around on the planet and like this area ends up over a pole or something, right? It would be that without humans touching it stably for hundreds of years. That's the climax community. So around here, when we talk about climax community, you have probably never seen one. Why? Because humans cut trees down like crazy. We just like seem to love cutting them down. It's like our thing. Right? We build our houses out of them. We build our furniture out of them. We chop trees down like crazy. Have you ever seen a tree that was like half the size of this room? No, you're not going to see one in Indiana. It's not that they couldn't exist. It's that we would cut them down and use them. Right? So if we left this area long enough, what types of trees? There would be oaks, there would be beeches, there would be maples. It would look actually quite a bit different than the forest we visited the other day. It's because of that, and we refer to that as old growth forest. It's the same word for climax community. But what's an old growth grassland? The grass, right? So that's what we're talking about here. It depends on where you're at. So let's talk the two types of succession. There's two types. They're super easy to keep straight. Primary succession is when succession starts from bare rock. So you can agree there's a difference. If we've got dirt, the stuff that can live there to start this process is really different than if we're talking like bare rock or bare Walmart parking lot. What if we bulldoze Walmart? I know, it's so sad, right? What if we bulldoze Walmart? Not at all. Then all that pavement was left. What would happen? We would be starting from primary succession, just like if there was a lava flow that covered the ground in bare rock. So what's got to happen now? Well, trees can't just start growing there, right? Unless the concrete's really thin and there's a good crack in it, nothing's going to grow there until we make some soil. So primary succession starts from bare rock after, say, some disaster or we leave some concrete bare, and it gets colonized by pioneer species. So the things that can live on the bare rock. And we learned about some of those the other day. Do you remember the lichens? Here is one of the primary pioneer species, and you'll probably want to know that for the test. It's called lichen, L-I-C-H-E-N. Mosses will start to grow too. We could probably consider them a pioneer species, but the lichens can actually grow on the rock, and they break it down into tiny little pieces that start to make up dirt. And then when they die, their little bodies go down in there and start to help make humus so that their stuff can grow in it. So they're some of the very first species to arrive. Okay. Remember, we talked about what a lichen is. A lichen is actually an algae and a fungus symbiotically living together in mutualism. So the algae benefits because it gets a place to live and nutrients from the rock, and the fungus benefits because it's stealing energy from photosynthesis that the algae is doing. So it's sort of this relationship they've got going on. It's a pioneer species. Now, what about secondary succession? Let's say that there's a forest fire, okay? This actually happened to me. I was living in the woods in a stick and leaf hut when a forest fire raged through a forest really close to me. It was scary, let me tell you what. If you've never seen a forest fire before, it's terrifying. I spent an entire day in the top of a tree just sitting there watching the flames, because if the wind changed direction, it was going to come towards me and burn up my little stick and leaf house that I lived in, right? I would have had to have evacuated really quickly. But luckily the winds kept going the same direction, and it jumped a highway. You see this highway here, and it continued on that direction. So this is actually after the burn happened. And you can see here, these trees are they're black because they're charred. The fire was huge. I mean, like 10, 15 feet above the tops of the trees. You could see it from miles away. It's a humongous fire. And afterwards, I walked over there and I walked through the area because I wanted to see like what was going to happen after a fire burns. Like, how often do you get to really see that? And a lot of this area burned. And I found some weird things. Like, do you recognize these funny little coil things? Anybody recognize what that is? It's not. That's a good guess. It's not a stove, though. What did somebody say over here? It is a mattress. So I'm walking through the woods in areas I had walked before where the brush was like over my head, like you just impenetrable brush. And you look down, there's a mattress. You can see the old springs. I found weird things. There were cars that I didn't know were in the forest where I lived, where I was walking around. I'd never seen the car before until the fire burned everything else around it. I was like, there's a car there. How crazy is that? In fact, I found a little box turtle, unfortunately, who had perished in the fire by attempting to crawl and hide underneath a tire. Not the best hiding spot. If you know anything about how tires burn when they catch fire, right? You cannot put a burning tire out. It's really nasty. But anyway, it was neat to see this start to come back, and the very first things that started to arrive were these little ferns. They were growing right up through the mattress. You can see these are all ferns here. I didn't know that would be the first plant that came back. But it's very different than starting with lichen because there's no rock to worry about. The soil's already there. The plants, many of their seeds survive through that. There's some pine trees like jack pine whose cones only open up during a fire. Like they have to get hot, then the cones open and all the seeds fall out. So they need fire to reproduce. But that also wipes out all the competition, doesn't it? So this forest looks really different. But secondary succession, the point to take away, is that we're starting from having dirt. We have soil. It's different than bare rock, right? We're starting from actual soil. So after succession starts, we slowly progress up to what's called the climax community. So we work our way forwards until we reach the end, okay? So let's start from the very beginning here. And this is similar to what our climax community would be if we let Indiana go wild. So let's say we start from exposed rocks, just bare rock. Lichen would start to break it down. Then we might get some mosses growing in there. Finally, some grasses and what we would refer to as weeds would start to grow in there. Some little herbaceous plants, the shrubs. You can see like we're starting to build up larger and larger biomass as we go. Then we start to get a young forest. Tulip poplar trees, which are our state tree, grow like wildfire on disturbed soil. So if it's newly kind of created soil, these trees would spring up probably first. After a while, these trees start to give way to a more mature forest. It's not that there won't be any tulip poplar trees left, but the majority of the trees will be white oaks and hickories. As this continues, the forest continues to change until we end up with what's considered a beech and maple forest. And that would roughly be our biome here. There'd be hickory trees and a bunch of other stuff in there as well, but we would have these humongous beech trees and these humongous sugar maple trees that you have never seen before because we cut them all down. So it'd be really interesting to see what kind of animals live there. Like, do we even know? We don't have an area like this. And I guarantee you they would be different than the animals that live in the mature and the young forests that we currently have. So that's succession. It's pretty easy to understand. We're going to go down to lab here in a second, and then when we get back, we're going to be working on our biome activity.